Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's time. We need to talk about this book. So first things first, disclaimers at the beginning of this video. This is going to be spoilery, not only for this book, but for the whole series. So if you haven't read the series, what are you doing here? Okay, so now that that's out of the way, other disclaimer. This is not going to be a full review video. This is not going to be a full walkthrough reaction type video of every single scene and what I thought of it in this book, because let's be real, this book is almost 1,000 pages. That video would be 4 hours long if I actually walked through everything that happened in this book. But if you want a really good walkthrough review, Ashley Outpaged, I'll leave her review video linked down below. She did a really awesome job of walking through every pivotal scene that happened in the book and talking about it. She's also just full of sass, and she's very enjoyable to watch. So I will leave that link down below if you want a full walkthrough of the entire story. This is gonna be kind of an all over the place, not very coherent rambling of things that happened in this book, my reactions to them, and so forth. So I'm only going to talk about scenes that were really pivotal or that hit really hard for me personally. So if I don't touch on certain scenes that you wanted to hear my thoughts on, let me know down in the comments, because I'm more than happy to discuss further, but for the sake of the length of this video. I also am going to touch at the very end of this video about things that I wish had happened in this series, things that I'm still wondering about, and kind of my overall thoughts as a whole, what this series did for me. So that will be at the end of the video. But I think that is enough intro. I think that's all I really wanted to let you guys know before I really get into the meat and potatoes of this video. Getting into this book. First of all, I reread all the way through Throne of Glass right up until this came out, so everything was fresh in my mind. I ended up actually listening all the way through all of them, and I listened to this because I get through audiobooks faster. I think the narrator is actually pretty good for this series, and I just kind of wanted to continue the experience with how I was experiencing the rest of the series in the same media format, if you know what I'm saying. So that being said, I didn't actually annotate anything or really take notes as I was listening. I generally don't take notes or annotate or tab books on my first read through because I just kind of want to absorb the story and enjoy it. If I plan on doing a review video, I will go back and either reread or skim through and start marking things. I am just not a very good annotator when it comes to books. I'm very bad at tabbing things. So that being said, I've got one tab in here. Can you guys guess what it is? If you're new to this channel, you know that I am trash for Sarah J. Maas books. But my love for the Throne of Glass series is kind of just a small rubbish bin trash form versus my huge raging dumpster fire love for the ACOTAR series. So that being said, can you guess what this little tab is? That's right, we're jumping straight to the end of the book. I wasn't kidding about spoilers, but this is the one thing that I need to discuss in this book. She passed through a world of snow-capped mountains under shining stars, passed over one of those mountains where a winged male stood beside a heavily pregnant female, gazing at those very stars. Fae. They were Fae, but this was not her world. Sarah, what was that? So, obviously, that is the one little teeny tiny tidbit that was just tossed into this book that made me shit my pants. So, I just personally, okay, so obviously that was Fae-Sand, right? That was Rhys and Feyre. She's heavily pregnant, so we kind of understand timelines of how this series is running versus that series, and she also answered questions of whether this could take place in the same world as Prythian, just maybe really, really far in the past or really, really far in the future. Everybody has kind of speculated because the series are so similar and they both deal with Fae and half-breed human type things, if they were ever going to cross over. And I feel like she just kind of sprinkled a little salt in this story just to sit back and watch the fandom implode over that little tiny little paragraph. I'm going to talk a lot about this. I'm sorry. I just really wish that I could have seen Sarah's face when she just typed up those little 5 sentences and sat back and was like, oh man, the fandoms, they're gonna go crazy over this. She was probably just cackling at her computer typing that. Okay, so that is not a very vital thing to this story. I understand that, but the fact that she acknowledged Prythian in this world, my question is this going to take place in the ACOTAR series, because the timelines are pretty similar. At the end, spoilers for the ACOTAR series if you haven't read that yet. Give me like a minute and I'll move on from this. But so at the end of ACOFAS, she made it very abundantly clear that they are going to get pregnant very soon, if not from that final, sex scene. So does that mean that this is taking place pretty much simultaneously as that? And if that's the case, when we get the new book in the new trilogy in like 2020, whenever that's going to come out, is she gonna pay homage to that little scene? Like, are we gonna see like Prithian shake a little bit because somebody like went shooting through the sky? Questions. I need these answers. Okay, that's literally the only thing that I tabbed because I listened to this. I finished listening to this actually while I was at work. I am not a smart person. I was ugly crying by myself with a whole bunch of cats. So it was not the worst environment because I could just instantly emotionally purge onto like kittens, but it was not a smart decision to listen to the conclusion of this series while in a work environment. I learned my lesson, but I immediately came home and put a little tab there so that I can just flip back and reread that over and over and over again on how Rhys-Ann just gave her a little push through the dimensions. Just pushed her right on through. That happened. Okay, we're moving on. My arm is tired. So, things that I wanted to touch on in this story. If we start in the prologue, kind of like forward type things, I personally loved a couple lines that stood out in this entire book. There are definitely some lines that just kind of hit really hard, and one of those is one that she keeps bringing back, and I really appreciated that she kept bringing this line back. And that line is the one that says, "Once upon a time, in a land long since burned to ash, there lived a young princess who loved her kingdom." And I personally love that because not only is she paying homage to the fact that this is just a long, lengthy fairy tale or fantasy type story. Every time she brought that line back, it was usually in a very bleak and pivotal battle scene or just very bleak moment in the story to begin with, and it kind of brings you, the reader, back to what the actual story is and what the actual end goal is, and that this is ultimately just Aelin trying to get back to her kingdom. And I kind of liked that because she played on it a lot throughout the whole book. That line came up a lot, and it just kind of brought you back to the mindset that like you should be in when things were looking very dismal and you just were like panicking as a reader because you didn't know what was going to happen. She kind of brought you back to that point of like, this is what we want to happen. This is what the end goal is. All of this crazy stuff that's happening over here is all to get us back to this fairy tale line. But basically, like I said, I'm not going to go scene by scene by scene because this book jumps around a lot. Like every single chapter, we are following different sets of characters doing different sets of things, and it was just bananas the whole time. So we start out with Aelin and Lysandra, and so as I was reading this book, all of their scenes started to get repetitive because every time we jump back to them, it's just brutal battles. It's just warfare and political fighting and just battle after battle. And it got repetitive to me, but thinking back on it and thinking about it like while I was reading it, I really liked that Sarah included that in this series because first of all, we got to see that side of Aelin. Because Aelin was always kind of that like joking, swaggering, immature type character that we saw, but he had the backstory of being a military general and being very important and vital to the army. And we never saw that side of him, and I like that we finally got to see it. And we also got to see the fact that war is not fought in one big climactic battle. It's days and days and days of battling and people dying, and it's harrowing and exhausting, and I like that she showed that. I like that she showed that Aelin was like kind of getting broken over and over and over again just because it was a never-ending onslaught of the Morath army, and they just kept fighting, which is more realistic to like actual warfare and how battles are fought instead of just like one big catastrophic battle, which, I mean, we obviously get that too, but I kind of like seeing that little glimpse into like the warfare. Staying on the Aelin subject, the one huge complaint that I have about this book is how he treated Lysandra, and that Lysandra kind of just forgave him and moved on. This didn't sit well with me. I can see what she was trying to do, that he obviously felt extremely betrayed by Aelin and Lysandra for lying to him when Aelin kind of sacrificed herself and planned for Lysandra to take her place because she can shapeshift into looking like her. So I understand that he's angry about that, and I understand that they planned on kind of using him as like breeding stock to produce heirs because he has the Ash River line, but Everyone else was also mad at her, and Aelin pulls things like that for the entire series. Like, she definitely lies to people and goes behind their backs to kind of have this huge, bigger plan picture. But everyone else was hurt by that and betrayed by that, but they also ultimately moved on and still continued working towards the end goal, and Aedion didn't really process that the way that, like, Rowan did. And he treated Lysander like trash, and I didn't really appreciate that. And I like that Lysander kind of gave him the cold shoulder for, like, a majority of the book, but I ultimately didn't like that she forgave him. Like, everybody wants to see everybody have a happy ending, but I just didn't really like that she took Aedion that far. That was the one, like, gripe that I had with this book so far, is that he took it, like, a little too far. Like, be mad, fight, move on, and cope together over what happened, because you can't change it, it's already happened. And the fact that he, like, threw her out in the snow, and she even admitted that out of all the things that have happened to her in her life, that was the most offensive and the most demeaning thing that she's ever encountered. And then she just kind of ultimately forgave him and moved on. That one, it didn't sit well with me. Alrighty, moving into some of the scenes that just stuck in my head and were so brutal to read and so hard to get through is the beginning of this book when Aelin is still in Maeve's captivity and she is being tortured by Cairn, and Fenris is just forced to watch it happen, and they have this, like, communication system with the blinking where, like, blink 1 for yes, twice for no. So those scenes were hard. Torture scenes were not held back. Like, they got pretty brutal. Like, the hammer scene where he brought the hammer down on her knee. Ooh, they were so hard to read. Those scenes were just, like, brutal because you could see Aelin, like, holding strong, but you could also see her start to, like, crumble and break as they go. But basically, the next line that I want to talk about is "You do not yield," because that is like one of the most empowering lines that she just kept pushing in this, and it was like every single time you thought she was gonna crumble and break down, that voice came back in her head and told her, "You do not yield." And I was just like, preach it, sister, girl, we are with you, they're coming for you, you'll be okay. Oh my god, that hit hard. So, moving from the torture scenes into when she finally escapes and is running through the camp, and she finally gets reunited with Rowan and Elide and Lorcan, and she makes them go back to get Fenris. Okay, so we're talking about one of the emotional scenes in this book. Like, I only cried maybe 2 or 3 times while I was reading it, and this afterward scene was one of those where it was so hard to get through. First of all, when Rowan goes back and skins Cairn alive, I was just like, yes! Yes! But when they get Fenris out, and Fenris broke the blood oath, and he's basically dying, and Aelin gives him the blood oath to her, and her only order in her court is to live. That was, my heart was a-fluttering. That was intense. Okay, so this whole afterward scene where she is just screaming, "Take it off," referring to, like, the helmet or the mask that she had on and the shackles, and she's just, like, ripping at her skin and just, like, crumbling in front of them, and seeing Rowan's reaction that he doesn't know how to help her. Oh my god, I've never been so, like, emotionally triggered in a book. Like, that was one of the most painful scenes to get through because, like, you just understand what's happening, and it's so awful and traumatic, and it was every single time, like I said, I was listening to it, so every single time the narrator is screaming into my headphones, "Take it off, take it off," I was just like, get it off of her! Oh my god, it was emotional. Long story short, they get it off with the word marks, and we find out at the end of that chapter that all of her scars are wiped clean. She has no scars left on her. I feel like that was, like, the end moment of, like, you're emotionally traumatized, let's just break you, like, a little bit further, and I was just like, I lost it. It was so emotional because her entire life story is her scars, and they represent everything she's been through to get to this point, and she's just a clean slate at that point, and you're like, no! Oh my god. Oh my god. That whole storyline with Aelin at the first, like, half of this book was just like, oh, my heart struggled. It was rough, okay? Okay, moving into somewhat lighter topics. I want to talk about Dorian, and how Dorian was being dumb for a big portion of this book, and then Dorian evolved into, like, my favorite character from this series very quickly. So, we are following Dorian over the course of his whole travels with Manon and the 13 to try and find the last Kraken witches to join forces with, and he is also kind of secretly looking for the 3rd word key, and he takes it upon himself to learn how to shapeshift. So, what does that say about Dorian? That says Dorian, to me, in my mind, is more powerful than Aelin. Not only can he control all of the elements and kind of has an endless well of power like she does, he also can start to adapt and learn how to do other types of magic. Bitchin'. That's awesome. Dorian's story, I enjoyed it. His whole plot to sneak into the castle and act like he's gonna marry Maeve and blah blah blah. The whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, why are you so dumb? This is the dumbest thing ever. Why are you so stupid? But ultimately it gets revealed, like, he was just playing her the whole time, but the fact that he could go in as like a little mouse was hilarious to me. I don't know why. That was just really funny to me. He was like a literal fly on the wall for a lot of these scenes. I kind of like that she took that metaphor and like made it actually happen. So Dorian scenes were interesting to me, and I think Dorian is one of the characters in this series that has evolved the most, has the most character development from the very beginning when he was just kind of like a hot-headed ladies' man teenager of a prince to like this PTSD survivor, badass, super powerful king, magician, thing, potential Vogue demon, we don't know, Ashley, I hear you. His whole character growth, I just want slightly more of it because I feel like he kind of turned into a side character, even though he's one of like the OG three. He kind of fell to the background for a couple books because he had like the collar on and whatnot. I want to see a little bit more from him. Like, I feel like now I'm so invested in his character that I just want like just a little bit more, a little taste. So while we are in this group of folk, let's talk about my favorite character in this series, Manon, and Abraxos, and the 13. First of all, let's talk about this fan art. I know this fan art was commissioned and completed prior to the release of this book, but it kind of breaks me in half that these look like little ghosty figures who are hovering in the background for Manon. Okay, let's talk about the 13. So first off, we've got Manon. This entire story, she is hunting down the lost Kraken witches to join forces with them, but also convince the other Iron Teeth witches to join forces with her and fight for Terrasen and against everything that they have been raised and taught, basically. She's trying to tell people, we were told to be nasty, nasty monsters. We don't have to be, though. So, every moment of Manon's story is my favorite. Like, ever since we got introduced to her in Airfire, she has been my favorite character in the story, and I know I'm not alone in that. She's a lot of people's favorite character. So the scene that I want to talk about is when she finally accepts the crown as the Lost Kraken Queen, and it's just like a really empowering moment. And the moment where she is like flying to aid them, and all of the Lost Kraken witches, like who are scattered throughout all the lands, like dig out their brooms from wherever they were hiding and take off to fly. Oh, to me, that was like, my inner nerd was just screaming because like they needed all of the help that they could get, and in my mind this was like Gondor calls for aid. And it was also like in Star Wars where all the Jedi start to kind of like feel their power at the end of the movie, or it's like in Buffy when all the potential slayers come into their own power. My nerd net just got cast real far there. But that moment was just such a good fantasy nerd moment because it's one of those things where like you have this battle that is just kind of overwhelming and there's no way they're gonna survive, but then these like last ditch things come forward and you're just I'm getting a little hype. I'm getting sweaty in this video. Moving on to the most heart-wrenching scene that I want to talk about in this book. Okay, are you ready for it? The 13. Let's discuss it. I'm gonna do this without crying and without getting emotional because it's been a couple days since I finished this book and I think that I've processed it properly. Let's be real, I haven't. I just don't want to cry in this video. So, the 13 sacrificing themselves to bring down the witch tower with Manon's grandmother in it. That was one of those scenes, like, I knew we were gonna lose people in this book, but knowing Sarah J. Maas, we weren't going to lose mates. Because for some reason, she just kind of does that. She generally lets us fans have our happily ever after for whoever your OTP is. She doesn't break up mates. We lose friends, and in this story, we obviously saw, like, Fenris lose Connell, like, we lost friendships in the cadre. But the 13, I can't even express how emotional I was when that happened. Like when Astrid threw herself in and did the yielding, I just like burst into tears. Like, fuck, that was so emotional and it was so heartbreaking because, like I said, Manon is like my favorite character in this entire series. Like, yes, the whole series is revolving around Aelin and Terrasen and her crew, but let's be real, Manon's story parallels Aelin's the entire time, and she is like the second queen in this story that we're all rooting for, and she lost everything. Like, that's, in my mind, that's the equivalent of Aelin losing her entire crew, because Manon lost her 12 companions that she's spent her entire life training and growing up with, and that just happened in like a blink of an eye. Also, another thing that I'm gonna break your heart with here, I just mentioned that nobody loses their mates. Abraxos lost his mate. First of all, the fact that they even introduced that concept in the story warmed my little cold heart that Abraxos had a mate, because Abraxos is like toothless to me, okay, let's be real. The entire story with the Wyverns is just how to train your dragon in like more badass bitch and murdery ways, but Abraxos, he loves wildflowers, he fell in love, he found a mate, and his mate died. I wasn't okay with that. Why is nobody else talking about that? Damn it! Okay, so I know that I'm jumping around from scene to scene to scene, and I'm not even going in, like, chronological order of the story, but these are just thoughts as they're coming to my head of scenes that I want to talk about. The other scene that I want to talk about is Aelin and the dam breaking and Aelin and Lorcan. So, the battle is pretty much over, they're recovering, and then they realize that the dam is gonna break, and this will essentially release the river and like a tsunami that will take out everybody who is on the battlefield. And Aelin realizes that Lorcan is out there, hops on the horse, and just takes the fuck off, and it's amazing. That's like one of the coolest scenes, and I feel like that type of scene of like somebody racing on horseback against time to try and save somebody is like a quintessential fantasy book scene, and it was done so well with her just like screaming his name. Again, the audiobook, it was hard to read that. It was brutal. But they kind of get their happily ever after because he tells her that he loves her, and it's just, yes, I love Aelin and Lorcan. But when Aelin walks her little body out there and unleashes her power that she's been delving into for the past 3 months of torture, she's been tunneling into her power to take out Maeve in the end, and she uses this power to just like vaporize the tsunami that's about to kill everybody. That was the coolest thing. Like, honestly, scenes like that, Sarah writes them so well, because I feel like she's kind of laid the groundwork to build up with how pivotal things like that can be and how powerful they are so well that like when a huge like climactic explosion thing like that happens, you're just like, whew, you get goosebumps when you're reading it. So that was really bitchin'. I was kind of bummed out because I wanted to see a huge fiery attack on Maeve, but I kind of like that she used that to like protect her people, her being queenly and whatnot. So that was a bitchin' scene. Another bitchin' scene with her was when, I know, I'm jumping all over the place here, but when her and Dorian kind of decide to split their powers and try and take care of the whole word key situation, talk to the gods and whatnot. So that I feel like was a pivotal scene because it really showed that Aelin was still herself. Because not only did she go behind everybody's back and have an ultimate plan that she didn't tell anybody about, she pushed Dorian out so that she could still sacrifice herself and his father, because that was kind of a weird fluke event thing. She still tried to bargain to get Elena's soul free, and the gods were just like, nah, killed her. So I love that she still was true to herself, and as she's like getting pushed out of this like godly dimension type thing, she just unlocks the door for all of the little demons to come in, and the gods just have to deal with it. I like seeing that she still kind of had her little badass assassin-y, snarky type moments where she was like, fine, you don't want to do what I say? Have fun with this. Bye. So that was a scene that was interesting. We learned a lot about that, but ultimately nothing really happened from it, which was kind of a letdown for me because that's kind of what we were building up for. That's why we're hunting for the word keys for like 5 bajillion books. So that just kind of happened, and everybody was just kind of like, what do we do now? What happens now? I'm gonna reach a conclusion for like pivotal scenes here because I want to talk about other stuff, and this video is already crazy long. I already talked way too much. So battle is won, everything is kind of a happily ever after towards the end, and we are seeing Aelin's coronation. Again, the third emotional scene for me because it's kind of what we've been building up for like the past 7 books is to see her crowned as Queen of Terrasen. So the coronation was emotional, but what I liked about this book is that she kind of kept it real. The battles ended, but it's not all just like parties and everybody lives happily ever after. There's still meetings, there's still things to figure out, there's recovery. And I kind of like that, yes, she had an important coronation and everybody had like a night of dancing. It was a small moment compared to the grand scheme of what do we do now? So I liked that, and I'm gonna segue from that into things that I wanted more of, or things that I feel like were left unanswered or undone in this series. So that being said, I like that she didn't really focus on like a big celebratory thing. Even though we got like a little bit of it, it was still more focused on moving forward. What I feel like got left out of the story is seeing Manon, and at the end of this story, her whole, not necessarily coronation, but her stepping into the role as queen. Because as the story was progressing, everybody will agree with me that Aelin and Manon had parallel storylines. So I ultimately really wanted a parallel scene at the very end of the book with Aelin looking out over Terrasen and like seeing her lands that she worked so hard for. And I wanted a scene of Manon looking out at the wastes that she worked so hard for. She spent her entire life trying to get back to these wastes, and we never got to see her see them. So I feel like we kind of got like copped out of that a little bit. So I know that we saw like the flower that they brought back to her and she placed it on the memorial of where the 13 were sacrificed, which, whew, that was a rough one, okay? There were some tears a-flowing for that scene, but I like that it had the parallel that things were blooming in the wastes again, which means like the queen was in her rightful heir and they got their lands back. And I liked that the king's flower, the fire flower thing in Terrasen started to bloom again. So they had parallel stories among so many different things, and we didn't get to see Manon see her lands for the first time. I want that. I want that so badly. Same thing with Dorian going back to Rifthold and everything. I like that it showed that he was going to kind of raise the wyverns there, that they found like eggs of wyverns, and he was going to do like a new thing with that. And I like that Irene was going to open up a new like healing temple in Rifthold. So like we saw good things popping up, but I wanted just like a little bit more than what we got, other than just like a hopeful ending of things to come. Because I feel like we built up to so many things and we only got like just a taste of what we actually wanted to see, if you know what I mean. Do you know what I mean? One thing that does give me hope that I just found out about because Sarah mentioned it in one of her signings while she's on tour for this book, the book that is coming out next year, that is The World of Throne of Glass, I personally thought it was just going to be an encyclopedia, basically about everything that took place in this world. Like, there's so many characters and politics and lands that, like, it'll be nice to have something like that to keep everything straight. But she also said that it's going to kind of have an afterword in it that will give you a little bit more about each of the characters after everything happened. So I have hopes. I personally would love an Assassin's Blade or even like an Akafast type of novella just to see the happily ever after, because like when ACOWAR ended, Akafast was like a nice little like and they lived happily ever after type of thing after the big battle happened, after they recovered. You know what I mean? That's what I want from this. Okay, moving into littler things that I wanted to know more about and that I feel like I got gypped out of scenes that I was looking forward to. 1. The Fae from the north and the Wolf tribe. Where did they come from? Because I feel like that kind of blindsided me when they came riding into the battle. I was like, wait, whoa, who is that? When did she see them? Like, I know Aelin is famous for like conspiring with like off-land people and them showing up in battle and you being like, good job, Aelin. But like, where did the wolf people come from? I want to ride a wolf. I want to know more about those wolves. Same thing with the little folk, because the little folk showed up a lot in this book, and it kind of showed that she's like a dual queen between like those lands and Terrasen, if you know what I'm saying. The little folk, I want so much info about them because I picture them like the little forest spirits in Princess Mononoke or Totoro, any of the Studio Ghibli movies, like the little forest spirits. That's what I picture them as, and I want to know more about that. And I want to know more about, what is he, the Lord of the North, the King of the North, the huge stag deer that she goes riding into battle with. Like, I knew there was going to be a big scene with him in it, but I wanted a little bit more than her just, like, riding him into battle. I wanted to see, like, what's their relationship? What's his backstory? Where'd that come from? I know we get a taste of it. I know we do, but I want more. Same thing with the dragons that they just briefly mentioned in, I think, the Southeast Isles or something like that. The dragons that they talked about, are there dragons? Did they come back? Same thing with the sea dragons, or the sea wyverns that Lysandra mimicked to, like, get Rolf's army invested. Did those come back also? Because she made it seem like they were going to, but they never showed up in battle. So are those things that exist? Do they not exist anymore? I want more. I basically just want to know about all of the creatures and animals, because that's where my mind is at. Same thing with Fleetfoot. We did not get a reunion scene with Fleetfoot. Like, she got mentioned very briefly that she's getting very fat in the castle, but like, come on. My whole goal going into this book was that Abraxas and Fleetfoot made it out. I didn't care who died as long as the wyvern and the dog made it. I was gonna be okay with it. We never got a reunion scene with Aelin and her dog. Like, why didn't that happen? I know she was mentioned, but I wanted to see a really happy ending of like a dog running up to her and jumping on her, and it's adorable, and puppies. Oh, okay. So we missed that, but we also missed a reunion scene between Aelin and Nox, which I feel like is something that a lot of people aren't talking about. Nox, the guy that she befriended back in the beginning of Throne of Glass, he was like the other assassin person who was in the trials with her. He showed up and saw Lysandra as Aelin and kind of gave her a weird look because she didn't recognize him. They never actually reunited. Why didn't that happen? It would have been amazing to see that. And speaking of reunions, we never got like a huge reunion scene with everybody. I wanted a scene where literally all of our favorite characters are in the same room together. Like, yes, we got a reunion between Dorian and Chaol. That's cool. The original three were back together, and we eventually, at the very, very end, got to see Aelin and Adian reunite. But I feel like there was never like one big pivotal, like everybody's there and hugging and crying and it's amazing. Like, yes, that was probably the coronation scene, but it still focused more on Aelin. I just want to see everybody together and happy. Where's my novella, okay? Moving on to things that I really liked about this book. I'll be brief about this because this video is forever long. Things that I like about this. Every single character in this book was necessary. Every single person fought their own specific battle and played a pivotal moment in the end game. Even little characters like Evangeline still played a role in it, and I like that Aelin wasn't kind of the big explosion that just took over everything like it was kind of building up to be. Like, Irene took out Erewhon, Aelin took out Maeve, Astrid finally got to take out Manon's grandmother because she has every right to do that. And I loved that every single character played a pivotal role in the end game for this instead of just our main protagonist and the side characters helping her. Everyone was important. So I really like that she did that. I also really liked that it was like very female empowering because, like I said, the really big pivotal moments were Astrid and Irene and Aelin and Manon taking everything out. Like, they were the powerful characters in this story, and I loved that. One thing about her writing that I love is that while we're following so many characters who are spread out over so many different locations and all working on different goals, I never felt confused about where anybody was at any specific time. And I think that's partly because we've been reading the series for so long and we know these characters really well, but I never felt confused, not once, over the course of this, of trying to figure out why somebody was in a certain area or what a certain group of characters was like trying to achieve. It was very clear the whole time, so I feel like that says something about her writing. And the last thing that I want to talk about is just the character growth that she did in this. Obviously for Aelin, she turned from like a really annoying assassin into this queen-like character, and we saw her grow from being kind of selfish to just everything she does for her land and for her people. Same thing with Manon. Manon's story, I could go on forever about how the witch is transformed and everything. But the character that I want to talk about the most is Dorian. Like I said, Dorian has gone from this kind of cocky teenage prince boy who is spoiled and didn't understand power to this, like, this king that everybody respects, including the audience reading the story. And I just feel like the character growth across all characters was just, like, phenomenal. Like, Aelin just progressed so far, and Chaol obviously had his whole side story that was kind of a redemption arc for him. Every single character changed over the course of this book, and I feel like as readers we changed with them and we can appreciate everything that she put into this series. Okay, that being said, if you guys stuck with me this long, kudos to you, because I'm looking at my future editing, Chelsea, and apologizing already because this is gonna be a long video. I thought I would be able to contain my thoughts a little bit more. I couldn't, apparently, and I didn't even talk about like half of the scenes in this book. So I'm gonna go. Those are my thoughts about certain things that happened in this book and my afterward thoughts of what I want and things that I liked. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of Kingdom of Ash. Were you impressed with it? Were you not? Are you sad that it's over? Are you relieved that it's over? Just let me know down in the comments, and that's gonna be it for this video. I'm exhausted. I can't wait to put this book down. I will see you guys in my next one.